He stepped off the bus with $5 in his pocket and a crumpled address scribbled on the back of a napkin. The city loomed around him, grey, fast, unfamiliar. He didn't speak the language, didn't know anyone here, and hadn't eaten in 2 days. His name was Amir, and everything he'd known was now a memory buried beneath rubble and smoke, half a world away. That first night, he wandered until his legs gave out. A park bench became his bed. Hunger gnawed at him like an old enemy, and every sound in the dark felt like a threat. The cold slipped through his thin jacket, and he pulled it tighter, as if it could somehow protect him from the weight of this new life. He thought about home, his mother's voice humming while she cooked, the way his little brother used to sneak candy into his pockets. All of it felt impossibly far. The days that followed blurred together. He walked everywhere, looking for anything: work, food, even a kind word. But the world didn't stop for him. People passed without seeing him. Store signs blurred in a language he couldn't read. The last of his money went to a stale sandwich that barely filled him. Each rejection was a stone in his chest. He offered to clean windows, sweep sidewalks, carry boxes. Most turned away. One man told him to get lost. Another muttered something under his breath that Amir didn't understand, but the sneer was clear enough. He began to believe that maybe this was it. Maybe he had fled one kind of devastation, only to find another. By the 5th day, exhaustion settled into his bones. He sat outside a small, quiet cafe in a side street, watching people sip coffee and laugh. Their lives looked easy, clean. He hadn't bathed in a week. His shoes were torn at the soles. The smell of warm bread drifted from the cafe's open door. Maybe it was the sound of music playing softly inside, or maybe he just couldn't keep walking. He didn't notice the man watching him from the window. Inside, Harold, the cafe's owner, stood with a dish towel in hand. An older man, with tired eyes and a gentleness etched into the lines of his face. He had seen boys like this before. Not often, but enough to know that looked the kind that says, "I have nothing left, and I don't know what to do." And so, without saying a word, Harold poured a bowl of soup, cut a thick slice of bread, and walked outside. He didn't ask questions. He just handed the food to Amir and said softly, "Eat." Amir stared, unsure. Then, slowly, he took the bowl with trembling hands. In that quiet exchange, something shifted. A thread of hope began to weave itself through the cold. The warmth of the soup lingered long after the bowl was empty. Amir sat there, eyes lowered, unsure whether to stay or leave. He felt the familiar tug of shame that he had accepted charity, that he had nothing to give in return. But Harold didn't ask for anything. He just nodded and went back inside, leaving the cafe door open behind him. The next morning, Amir returned, not for food, but for something else he couldn't name. Harold was sweeping the front steps, the early sun casting long shadows on the pavement. He looked up and gave a small smile, then motioned to the broom. Amir stepped forward and took it. They didn't talk much. Words were few and awkward. Harold spoke slowly, gesturing more than he spoke. Amir listened hard, nodding even when he didn't fully understand. But something about the man's quiet presence made things feel less frightening. There was no pressure, no judgment, just rhythm. Wash dishes, wipe tables, stack chairs. Every small task felt like a stone placed gently back into a broken foundation. Days passed like that. Work in the morning, silence in the afternoon, a warm meal in the evening. Amir began to sleep better. He still didn't have a home, but Harold let him store his backpack in the back of the cafe. Sometimes he would catch the old man watching him with a kind of fatherly worry, like he wanted to ask 1,000 questions but knew none of them would help. One rainy afternoon, Amir tried to explain. With halting words, hand gestures, and a few scribbles, he told Harold about his home, the war, the loss, the long journey that brought him here. Harold didn't interrupt. When the story ended, he only said, "You're safe now." That night, Amir cried for the first time in months, quietly, alone. But it wasn't just grief. There was something else in those tears, a slow release, a soft cracking open. Harold started giving him a few dollars each week. "For you," he'd say, "not charity. You work." Amir took it hesitantly, tucking each bill carefully away. He bought a used dictionary from a thrift store. He practiced words during his breaks, repeating them under his breath as he cleaned. Harold corrected his pronunciation gently, with the patience of someone who had nothing but time. One morning, Amir walked into the cafe with a new spark in his eyes. He held up a flyer local community center offering English classes. He pointed to it and said, "I want to learn." Harold's smile was quiet, but proud. The cafe had become more than a place to work. It had become a lighthouse in the fog. And in Harold, Amir had found not just a mentor, but the first thread of belonging. Months passed, and with each one, Amir grew steadier. The once lost hollow-eyed young man was now speaking full sentences, joking with customers in broken English, even learning to brew coffee just right. The cafe had become his world, a space where he was no longer invisible. He saved every dollar Harold gave him, living on the simplest meals, wearing the same clothes until they frayed. His dream was small, but clear. Send money to his mother, who had stayed behind to care for his younger siblings. It pained him not to know if they were safe, but he believed he had too, that she'd one day read his letter and know he had made it. One day, with trembling fingers and a heart full of pride, Amir handed Harold a small envelope. Inside was $300, everything he had. "For my family," he said softly. "I send." Harold nodded, his voice thick. "They'll be proud of you." The next step came unexpectedly. A local vendor, who frequented the cafe, was retiring. He offered Amir a chance to buy his used food cart, worn but functional. Amir's eyes lit up like he was seeing the sun after a long winter. He counted his savings again and again. It was just enough. Harold looked at him long and hard. "You're ready," he said. The food cart became Amir's new beginning. He sold simple sandwiches, coffee, and homemade pastries he'd learned to bake from Harold's old recipes. At first, business was slow, but people remembered him from the cafe. The polite young man who always said thank you, who smiled even when he looked tired. Word spread. He woke before dawn, worked until sunset, and returned to Harold's cafe to help with closing duties. The two rarely spoke about what Amir was building, but the pride in Harold's eyes spoke louder than words. Then, one crisp spring morning, Amir unlocked the door to his very own space. It was a small, empty storefront across the street from Harold's cafe. The sign above read, "Amir's Table." He didn't invite a crowd, just Harold. They sat inside on mismatched chairs, sipping strong coffee, surrounded by the scent of fresh bread and the faint echo of music playing softly in the background. On the wall, Amir hung a single black and white photograph of Harold, smiling faintly behind the counter, eyes kind as always. Harold passed away quietly that winter. Amir closed the cafe for a day, placed flowers beneath the photo, and cooked the soup Harold had once handed him on that cold day. He offered it free to anyone who walked in hungry. Amir had built something out of nothing, not just a business, but a life, a warm place in a once cold world. From $5 and no words to a full heart and a space filled with laughter, Amir's journey was never about money. It was always about the quiet, persistent power of being seen. Sometimes, it takes just one kind soul to remind us we still matter. Amir's story isn't about miracles, it's about small, unseen acts of courage. The kind that build bridges out of loneliness. The kind that slowly turns survival into life. If you've ever felt like you're starting from nothing, remember this: even the smallest light can guide you home. If this story touched your heart, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to help bring more of these quiet, powerful stories into the world. Leave a comment, we'd love to hear your thoughts or your own journey of change.